If you're 65, 80 and can still do this, you're a rare gem and destined to live to 100. Senior health. Every morning in suburban Charleston, 78-year-old Richard Thomas still wakes up early, walks out onto the porch, brews a pot of coffee, and reads the paper. He has lived in the same house for more than 40 years, where he and Sylvia raised 3 children, climbed onto the roof to fix the television antenna, and carried bags of soil to plant flowers for her each spring. But this morning, something strange happened. He put the newspaper down on the table, stood up as usual, and realized what his doctor had said 2 years ago. If you can stand up without using your hands at age 80, you're in the top 15% of seniors in America. And he did it. Stood up without holding on, without staggering. It was just a small act. But Richard knew it was a sign that he's not just living long, he's living powerfully. Welcome to today's video, where we'll explore 8 incredibly important signs that you, or someone you love, has a good chance of living to 100. It's not magic. It's not genetics. It's the little things you do every day that quietly protect you from aging. And if you can still do these things, you are a rare gem in the modern world. Watch until the end of the video, because sign number 8 is something that even many doctors rarely mention, but it determines the quality of your life for the next 20 years. If you are aged 65, 80, or have a loved one who is, take a close look at this video. After this introduction, if you find the content useful, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and comment your own story, or share it with a loved one who is going through the same thing. Every morning, Richard Thomas makes coffee with his left hand, not because he is left-handed, but because his right hand often shakes slightly after a long sleep. But for him, it is not a sign of weakness. It is a small ritual to measure how much he can do today. Richard was 78. A tall, dark man, he had been a carpenter in Charleston for 40 years. His wife, Sylvia, had died of a stroke 7 years earlier, and he had lived alone in an old 2-story house in the suburbs. No one called him lonely. They used to say, "Richard is so independent." But he knew that he lived with memories, not alone. Every corner of the house had traces of Sylvia, the chair she used to knit, the pillow she embroidered, the pot of lavender on the balcony that she replanted every year. They still existed together, just one of them could no longer speak. That morning, as he took his first sip of coffee, he stood up without thinking. It was a normal movement, but this time he noticed. He didn't need to hold on to the chair. His back was straight, his legs were steady. The movement was neat, like a young man's. And suddenly the doctor's words from 2 years ago echoed in my mind. Richard, if you can still stand up without using your hands at 80, you are in the 15% of seniors with the lowest risk of falling, and will live longer than most of your peers. He smiled slightly, not because he wanted to live long, but because he had just proven that he was still living the way he wanted to. The way he had always respected since Sylvia was alive. Living kindly, not bothering anyone, and not letting time rob him of his dignity. 7 years ago, after the funeral, he almost collapsed. His body was tired, he had no appetite, and his legs felt like something was holding him back. The climax came when he sat down in an armchair after his first shopping trip without his wife. When he stood up, he had to push himself up with both hands. It took him a few seconds to regain his balance. For the first time, he felt like a child learning to walk again. His grandson, Michael, then 10, stood nearby. He said nothing, but his eyes were the same as his father's when he had looked at Sylvia the first time she had collapsed in the kitchen. Worried, helpless, and loving. That night, Mr. Richard rummaged through his wife's old bookshelf. She had written down many little things about health, exercise, food, and longevity tips. One of the notes read, "Strength is not how much you can lift, but when no one helps you, you can still stand up." He folded the paper and put it in his wallet, and from the next day he began to practice, not to prove anything to anyone, but to keep his promise to his wife. To live a decent life, not to depend on others, not to let time take away his pride as a man. At first he couldn't stand up without holding on, but he practiced little by little, every day, 3 times in the morning, 3 times in the afternoon. His knees hurt, so he applied heat. His pillows were soft, so he lowered them. Some days he was so tired that he just sat and breathed evenly, not practicing. But he never missed a day. 1 year later, he could stand up from any chair without holding on, without momentum, without anyone's support. Someone asked, "Why are you so miserable?" He simply replied, "Because I don't want one day, my grandchild to have to help me get up from the floor. They didn't understand, but he did, because he'd had to do it for Sylvia, support the person he loved most, and see the shame, the helplessness in their eyes. Now, he lives every day by a simple principle. If today I can stand up without holding on, then today I am still myself. No one sees, no one praises. But self-respect needs no applause. Freedom needs no audience. Some mornings he stood up 3 times in a row, just to check if his legs were still shaking. Some days he counted his heartbeat, then wrote it down in his notebook. Not fast, still good. And this morning, as he rose so easily, he knew. Not only had he won a battle with old age, but he was on the right track to living a long life without fading away. Living without asking others to help you stand up is living with dignity. In the evenings, Mr. Richard often told Michael stories of his youth, how he used to jump on roofs when he was a young man, how he carried Sylvia across the stream when they were dating. But now, he told a different story. You know what the hardest exercise is? Not push-ups, not weightlifting. What is it, sir? It's getting up from a chair when no one is helping you and still smiling. You might think that standing up without using your hands is a small thing, but in fact, it is the hinge between independence and dependence, between being able to live independently and starting to need someone else to take care of you. A person who can still stand up is a person who can still control the rhythm of life. What about you? When was the last time you stood up without holding on to a handrail? If you can do it, congratulations. You are living strongly. If not, that's okay. Because tomorrow, you can start again. Like Richard did, day by day, step by step, so that a small gesture becomes a symbol of resilience. Esther, the woman who walked every day as if she was escaped from a pain. Esther Campbell, 75, lives in a small rural community near Wichita, Kansas. She doesn't use a smartphone. She doesn't check social media. She doesn't answer emails. But every morning at 6 a.m., sharp, she laces up her shoes, puts on a frayed khaki jacket, and steps out of the old cabin where she's lived alone for more than 15 years. She walked, not in a hurry, not slowly. Each step seemed to measure the beat of her heart, steady, not hurried, but never stopping. People in the area often joke, if one day Esther is not seen walking, then there must be a level 12 storm that day. She just smiles. Her smile is slightly pursed, like someone who is used to people not understanding why she keeps walking like that. No one knows. She goes to keep her heart from breaking. At the age of 59, Esther lost her only son in a traffic accident. The boy's name was Elijah, only 25 years old, about to get married, about to move to Washington to take up a new job. One evening, while driving home to visit his mother, the car lost control and plunged into the icy river. No one was able to save him. Esther said that night she cried like a wounded animal, but the next morning, before the sun had even risen, she put on her coat, went outside, and walked. No reason, no destination. She just knew that if she stayed in the house, she would not be able to breathe. And so she kept going, day after day. At first it was 10 minutes, then 30, then an hour. A year later, she could walk 3 miles every morning, through the woods, past the stream, past where Elijah used to fish. Each step was a way for her to talk to him, in silence. People thought Esther was strong, but in reality she was just running away from a sadness that never quite went away. When she was 70, she went for a routine checkup. The doctor looked at her records and shook his head in amazement. Your lungs are clean, your heart is healthy, your blood pressure is stable like a 50-year-old woman. What is your secret? Esther smiled softly. I just walk every day, doctor, because if I don't walk, my heart will lie down forever. Walking sounds simple, but at 75, walking without fatigue, without pain, without being out of breath, is anything but normal. It is evidence that lung capacity is still sufficient, the heart is still strong enough, leg muscles are still strong enough, and, most importantly, the will is still unyielding. Esther did not walk fast, but she never stopped. Each step was a silent message to Elijah. I am still alive. I still miss you, but I will not break. Young people often say, old age slows down because health declines. But Esther proved the opposite. When your mind refuses to let go, your body will continue to move forward. Last year, she slipped while crossing a wooden bridge after a rain. Her right leg was bruised, The whole neighborhood thought she would be in bed for at least 2 weeks. But after 3 days, she appeared again, walking slowly, with Elijah's wooden cane. A broken leg can still be healed, but a broken will cannot be mended, she said. Every morning when she passed the old church, she stopped for 30 seconds. No prayer, just silence. Then she kept walking. Her doctor, a young woman named Lisa, once asked, "Mrs. Esther, what do you think when people call you the symbol of vitality in this area?" Esther looked out at the field and replied, "I don't go to live long. I go so that every day I remember Elijah, I am still alive." But the strange thing was that, while she was walking to keep her spirits up, her body was getting stronger. Dr. Lisa compared her activity index, heart rate, oxygen saturation, and discovered that Esther had a biological age 12 years younger than her actual age. You may not believe it, but Esther has never taken blood pressure medication, never set foot in a nursing home, never needed help with grocery shopping. And the secret? No supplements, no gym, just regular walking as a ritual to keep her soul alive. Old people are often afraid of cold wind, rain, and slipping, but Esther said, "The thing I fear most is the day I can't step out of the door," because that day, she knew she would no longer be herself. Walking is not to prove anything to anyone. It is to keep your heart from turning to stone, keep your lungs from growing moldy, keep your mind from going wild. Esther, 75 years old, is not an athlete. She has no medals, but every step she takes is a small victory with destiny. And if you, the person watching this video, can still walk a distance of 10 minutes without stopping to catch your breath, know that you possess one of the strongest longevity indicators that modern science has ever calculated. You don't need to run a marathon. You don't need to have six-pack abs. Just walk steadily, without shame, without getting out of breath. And if you can't do it today, remember, Esther started from pain, and you can start from hope. Frank. The man who stands on one leg holds up a whole life. Frank Miller, 76, lives in a small town near Dayton, Ohio. He was a firefighter, a hero to his wife and children, and had the steely shoulders to carry his family through the winter storm of 1989. But in recent years, the very feet that had walked through fire and smoke began to make him doubt, not because he fell, but because he almost fell, in a moment that seemed meaningless. It was a cold March morning with a light drizzle outside. Mr. Frank, as usual, sat on the bed reaching for his socks from the drawer. One he had already put on. The other, he raised his leg as usual, but in less than 3 seconds, he lost his balance and fell to the side. Luckily, he was sitting on the bed, so he wasn't hurt. But he didn't get up right away. He sat there, looking down at his feet, and felt something very strange. For the first time in his life, he was afraid of his body. Frank didn't tell anyone about it, not even his wife. But that afternoon, he stood in the bathroom, in front of the mirror, and tried again. He lifted his left leg, arms slightly out to the sides. 4 seconds. Then he staggered. The second time, 6 seconds. Then he touched down. The third time, he stood for 10 seconds. Sweat broke out lightly on the back of his neck. And in that moment, he understood one thing. If I can't keep my balance, I can't keep my life. People often think of aging as being accompanied by back pain, memory loss, or blurred vision. But few people realize that balance is the first thing that quietly leaves us. Frank started to research. He read material from the Mayo Clinic, listened to podcasts from geriatricians, and he discovered people who can't stand on one leg for 10 seconds have an almost 84 for a higher risk of dying in the next 10 years than those who can keep their balance. It's not just a number. For Frank, it's a wake-up call. From that day on, he began his journey to regain his balance, not with expensive equipment, not at the gym, but right in the living room, on the wooden floor, next to the sofa where his wife often sat knitting scarves. At first, he stood on one leg for 5 seconds at a time, his hands lightly touching the wall. Then he tried closing his eyes. He couldn't last more than 2 seconds. Then he listened to soft music, stood up, bent his knees, lifted each leg slightly like Tai Chi. His wife, Martha, initially thought he was crazy. "What are you doing, Frank?" "I'm learning to live another 10 years, she laughed. But a few days later, she tried standing on one leg. It didn't work. Then she tried again. From then on, every morning, The couple took turns standing on one leg while warm water filled the teapot. 6 months later, Frank can stand on one leg for more than 20 seconds, eyes open, arms hanging down, just like he used to do as a firefighter standing on a ladder, in midair. But the difference is, now he does it to keep himself from falling into silence. Not only did he feel better, his mind was clearer too. His back hurt less, his neck was less stiff, and most importantly, he no longer felt like a brittle old man. Frank told his family doctor, a young man named Marcus. When Frank presented the exercise of standing on one leg while making tea, the doctor just nodded silently and said, "Frank, you're not just keeping your balance, you're holding on to your youth every second." Since then, whenever someone asks about the secret to living well after 75, Frank only answers briefly, "Don't let yourself fall, either in the living room or in your mind." Because falling once when you're old can mean falling forever. How many people just slip in the kitchen, break their hip, end up in bed, and never walk again? But for Frank, nothing is more terrifying than losing control of his body. If today you can still stand on one leg for 10 seconds, be happy. You are not only healthy, you are also maintaining the ability to live independently, not depending on your children and grandchildren, not afraid of falling without anyone to catch you. And if you can't do it yet, don't worry. Because Frank started off standing for just 4 seconds. It's not how long you stand today that matters, it's whether you're willing to stand again tomorrow to try one more time. There's a crucial step ahead, one of the most obvious and most overlooked signs of longevity, the ability to sit down on the floor and get up without help. Let me tell you the story of Joseph, who was afraid to sit down and play with his grandson while playing with Lego because he was afraid he would not be able to stand up again. But that changed his life forever. Joseph, the man who learned to sit down and stand up from the heart. Joseph Ramirez, 78, lives in a western suburb of Denver, Colorado. His house is not big, just 2 bedrooms and a small kitchen, but it is filled with the laughter of his 2 grandchildren, Leo, 6, and Sarah, 4.5. On weekends, the house lights up earlier than usual. Leo often runs into his room shouting, "Grandpa, come down and play with me in Lego." And then, that little moment, to adults, was just sitting on the floor playing with his grandchild. But to Joseph, it was a silent embarrassment, because he wasn't sure he could stand up again if he sat down. It started when he was 74. Joseph was still in good health, or so he thought. Every morning he would drive to the local bakery, read the newspaper, and take a 30-minute walk in the park. But he began to refuse to sit on the floor, citing back pain and weak knees. The truth is, he was scared. One time, while he was arranging his clothes, Leo's shirt fell under the bed. He knelt down and reached down to pick it up. But when he wanted to stand up, his whole body seemed to have no strength. His knees made a small crack sound. His hands pressed hard against the mattress. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He had to use both hands and both feet to hold on to the bed frame, and it took him more than 20 seconds to stand up. No one witnessed, but for Joseph, it was the first time he felt his body abandon him. That day, he sat in front of the mirror for a long time, brooding. Not because he was self-conscious, but because he felt his freedom was beginning to be threatened. He didn't want one day, when Leo ran up and pulled his hand to the floor, to have to answer, "Sorry, you can't sit anymore." For him, sitting on the floor and then standing up was more than just an exercise. It was a symbol of self-esteem. It was the distance between a strong grandfather and one who was starting to depend on him. And so, Joseph began practicing, quietly, silently, in his bedroom. He laid an old yoga mat on the floor. Every night before going to bed, he would sit down, slowly, and then try to stand up without using his hands. At first, he couldn't do it. He fell sideways. He had to support himself with both hands. His back was sore for the first few days, but he remembered something his late wife Sylvia had said. "Just a little bit each day. By the end of your life, you will have gone very far." And he continued. Day after day, he set small goals. First week, sit down and stand up with your hands on the ground. Week 2, stand up using only one hand. Week 4, try not to use your hands, even for a few seconds. After 2 months, he did it. Slowly, but without holding on. And for the first time, when Leo said, "Grandpa, come down and play on the floor with me," Joseph smiled and sat down on the floor with his own feet. Leo didn't notice the difference. But Joseph felt like he was coming back to life. You see, the ability to sit down on the floor and then stand up without help is a very important sign that many seniors don't notice until they lose it. According to a Brazilian study published in the European Journal of Preventive Cardiology, people aged 50 and older who cannot stand up from a sitting position on the floor without using their hands are 5 to 6 times more likely to die within 6 years than those who can. Why? Because the move requires leg muscle strength, flexibility of knee and hip joints, ability to maintain balance, and, most importantly, total body coordination. If you can do it, it means your entire motor system is working smoothly and efficiently. If you can't do it, that's okay. It took Joseph almost 60 days to do that seemingly simple thing again. One afternoon, as Joseph and Leo sat on the floor playing with blocks, Leo asked, "Grandpa, how much longer are you going to play with me?" Joseph looked at his grandson and replied, "If I can still get up after playing, I will play forever." Leo nodded, then held out his hand as if to help him up. But Joseph refused. He put his hands on his thighs, took a breath, and stood up without shaking, without swaying. They both laughed out loud. It is not a physical exercise. It was a statement. I am still alive in the way I choose. If you can sit on the floor today and stand up without holding on, know that you are among the most independent seniors. If you haven't done it yet, remember Joseph. He started from zero, for one reason only. He didn't want to lose the right to sit down and play with the person he loved. Henry, the man who don't want to let his wife see his weakness. Henry Blake, 74, is a big man, both literally and figuratively. He was a high school basketball coach in the small town of Grand Junction, Colorado. A man known for his firm grip and thunderous voice. Keep pushing, boys. But at some point, even the strongest of people can find themselves broken. The story happened on an early winter afternoon. Henry had just returned from the supermarket. Paper bags full of groceries, from cartons of milk and orange juice to cans of dog food. Before, it would have taken him just one trip, 2 bags in each hand, to climb the steps as if he had never aged. But that day, as he lifted the bag, his shoulder hurt as if it was stabbed by a knife. He staggered. He put his bag down on the steps. It took him a moment to catch his breath, and what hurt him the most wasn't the numbness in his shoulder, but when he turned around, he saw his wife Marianne standing behind the window, looking out with worried eyes. That look made him feel smaller than ever. Henry didn't talk much that night. He sat quietly at the dinner table, resting his forehead on his hands. Marianne just quietly placed the bowl of soup in front of him, then sat down next to him. No one said anything, but they both knew deep down something had changed. The next day, Henry went into the old shed and pulled out 2 dusty old dumbbells. What was even more old was his pride, which was being tested every day. He didn't want the day to come when even carrying a small bag of groceries would require him to call his wife for help. Henry started practicing, not loud, not grand, simply, every morning, 10 minutes of light shoulder lifts. Each way, push-ups against the wall. Evening, squeeze your hand, clench your fist tightly, and hold for 10 seconds. Practice squeezing force again. You will think, what a big deal. Why make a big deal out of it? But you know what? Grip strength is one of the most accurate predictors of longevity recognized by modern science. According to research from the University of Michigan, people with weak grip strength in old age are twice as likely to die in the next 10 years as those with strong grip strength. Henry didn't know the statistics, but he felt it, that if he did nothing, his body would continue to slide. And he doesn't want to be the husband whose wife has to help him step by step, instead of holding his hand like before. The first week, his hand shook. The second week, his shoulder was in excruciating pain. But the third week, when Henry carried 2 full bottles of water from the kitchen to the garage, he no longer felt tired. And by the 6th week, he carried the shopping bags from the car into the house, with the same old steadiness. Marianne saw him. She looked at him. This time, her eyes were no longer worried, but sparkling with something, like the first day she watched him step onto the stage to present the championship trophy to his students in 1978. Henry did not regain his strength to return to his youth. He only wanted to keep one thing for himself: the ability to take care of yourself, to continue to be a support for the person you love. A man who knows how to carry his own bags is also strong enough to keep family happiness from drifting away. Today, Henry still maintains the habit. Squeeze the towel by hand, Do not use a machine. Open glass jars with bare hands. Do not use rubber tongs. Push-ups every morning before making coffee. He doesn't call it practice. He calls it a daily test to see if he's still alive, the way he wants to be. And you, if today you can still carry a 3 to 5 kilo bag without feeling tired, shoulders, or sore wrists, know that you are holding within you one of the most powerful signs of longevity your body can give off. And if you feel weaker than before, don't worry. Henry started with just a full bottle of water, one in each hand. Every week he increased it by 200 grams. No one saw, no one knew, but step by step, he got himself back. Walter, the man who chose to take the stairs instead of the elevator, so as not to leave his heart behind. Walter Jenkins, 79, lives in a third-floor apartment on the outskirts of Portland, Oregon. At his age, many people would choose a ground-floor home or a nursing home, but not Walter. He chose the third floor, not because he liked the view or to exercise, but because it was where he felt he had to try a little harder every day. Walter was a bridge engineer, a man of precise millimeters. His personal life was full of twists and turns. After his wife Helen died of lung cancer when Walter was 72, he lived alone. At first, Walter had no sense of time. Days passed by like a clock ticking in an empty room. He ate little, walked little, breathed shallowly. And one day, he walked out to the supermarket near his house, only 500 meters away, and had to stop 3 times because he was out of breath. For the first time in his life, he heard his heart beat irregularly. The doctors weren't surprised. Normal for his age, they said. But Walter didn't accept normal. He started again, not by going to the gym, but by climbing the stairs to his third-floor apartment. Every morning he walked down slowly, counting each step. Then in the evening he climbed back up, no elevator. At first, he could only climb 1 flight. Then he had to stop halfway up. His chest tightened, his face turned red, but he didn't turn back. He leaned against the railing. He took a deep breath and climbed, 1 step at a time, not because anyone forced him, not because no one was waiting, just because he didn't want to let his heart get used to the surrendering. After a month, he climbed all 3 floors without stopping. After 2 months, he finished climbing and still had enough breath to open the door and hum a favorite jazz song. Walter was not as strong as he had been, but he was in control of his breathing. Did you know? Stair climbing ability is a very accurate predictor of cardiovascular health, longevity, and risk of heart failure. According to research from the University of Coruña, Spain, if you can climb 4 flights of stairs, about 60 steps, in under 90 seconds, the chance that you do not have dangerous cardiovascular disease is very high. Climbing stairs is more than just exercise. It's a silent test of your heart, lungs, and entire circulatory system. Walter didn't have an athlete's heartbeat, but he had a strong heart. And every time he climbed the last step of the stairs and opened the door to his apartment, he felt as if he had won a battle that no one had seen. One day, his granddaughter, little Ellie, came to visit. She ran happily ahead, reaching the 3rd floor without tiring. Walter followed, not out of breath, but still slowly. At the 2nd and a half floor, Ellie looked down. "Grandpa, why don't you take the elevator?" Walter looked up and smiled. "Because I don't want my heart to be lazy to work." Ellie didn't understand. But she smiled, then turned and took his hand, and they walked up the last few steps. You see? Every step you take doesn't just lift you up another 20 centimeters. It's another beat of life. Another time, your heart proves that it still wants to beat for you. And if today you can climb 1 floor, 2 floors, without stopping halfway, know that your heart is still strong enough to take you to 90, even 100. And if you're out of breath after climbing 5 flights today, don't panic. Walter starts over with 1 flight, just 1. It's not how many flights you climb, it's whether you're willing to keep going. Louise, the woman who doesn't let her memory fade. Louise Whitman, 88, lives alone in the small town of Lake Champlain, Vermont. Her house sits on a gentle hill where the wind carries the scent of fresh grass and water. She has no husband, no children, but she is not alone, because her memory is the house that contains a whole world. Every morning, Louise wakes up at 6. She makes a pot of mint tea, puts on an old record, and opens her notebook to write down what day it is, what the weather is like, what she just remembered. One day, She wrote down the Dylan Thomas poem, "Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night," verbatim. Another day, she wrote down a list of her 12 third-grade classmates at Elm Street Elementary School, including their middle names and their parents' names. She remembered everyone's birthday. Even though they were all dead, Louise used to be a librarian, a person who lives among books and silence, but also a person who fears the silence inside her head the most. When she turned 75, she watched a close friend, Emily, begin to forget things. First, the little things, where she put her keys, her birthday. Then bigger things, her grandchild's name, the route home, even the fact that Emily used to be a literature teacher. Louise did not cry, but from that day on, she started reading one article, one chapter of a book, and learning something new every day, not because of fear of aging, but because of fear of losing yourself. One time the doctor asked her, "At nearly 90, you still remember everything. What is your secret?" Louise replied softly, "I don't leave my brain idle. Just like I don't leave my house empty. It gets dusty overnight." She doesn't use a smartphone, but she has 9 thick notebooks, recording every book she's read, every friend's birthday, every word puzzle she's solved. One early winter morning, while walking by the lake, Mrs. Louise's blood pressure dropped, her legs shook, her vision blurred, and she fell. People nearby came running to her, but when the nurse asked, "What is your name?" she replied immediately, "Louise Whitman. Born? 1936. Current medications? No, maintained by diet and mental exercise. Closest contact? Dr. Janice Collins, 802 I." The nurse looked at her in amazement. There was not a moment's hesitation. And that was what told the doctors she hadn't had a stroke or a concussion. She just had a temporary drop in blood pressure, and her brain was sharp and alert. You see, memory is more than just remembering your children's names. It's a measure of survival, of sanity, of self-determination, and of the ability to protect yourself when no one else is around. Scientists call it cognitive resilience, and according to Harvard University, older adults who read, learn new things, play chess, or socialize regularly have up to a 45% lower risk of dementia. Louise had no idea what those numbers were. She only knows. If she still remembers poetry, remembers friends, remembers herself, then she is still truly alive. If you still remember today, name of old friend, a song of youth, a story from school days, then be happy. You are keeping the fire inside your head burning. And if your memory is fading, don't panic. You can start by practicing small things, like Louise did, by writing down your thoughts every morning. No one lives long just by being physically fit. If you want to live to 90, 100, you need a memory to know who you are. John, the man saved from his sleep. John Lancaster, 81, lives in Asheville, North Carolina, where the hills are rolling, the air crisp, and the maple leaves burn red in the fall. On the surface, he is a quiet, polite man who greets his neighbors every morning with a slight smile and a fedora that is faded with age. No one knew that for 10 years, John had never had a full night's sleep. It all started after his wife, Margaret, passed away in her sleep. John, who used to go to bed early and wake up early, became a sleepyhead who stayed up until 3 a.m., sitting silently staring at the nightlight casting a yellow glow on the ceiling. He was afraid to close his eyes, afraid of silence, afraid that sleep would mean oblivion. Every night, he tossed and turned hundreds of times. He would sleep for less than 30 minutes before his heart started to beat fast. His hands would sweat, and his head would be filled with questions. What should we eat tomorrow? Have we locked the door yet? How long will I live? As he grew older, John's sleep was robbed not by illness, but by a sadness that silently ate away at his circadian rhythms. The doctor prescribed medicine. He took it. After a while, he was able to sleep. But he was tired. His head felt heavy, as if someone had dipped it in lead water. John quit smoking, tried meditation, couldn't concentrate, tried meditation music, turned off phone, changed mattress. Didn't work. One day, he visited his son Timothy in Georgia. That night, John stayed up all night as usual, but the next morning, Timothy left a note on the table. I don't know how long it's been since you've slept, but I do know that if you're alive and not sleeping, it's like you're fading away and no one's turning you back on. That sentence touched his heart like a bell in the forest. He burst into tears. From then on, John changed. He didn't try to go back to sleep. He tried to live again. In the morning, he goes out into the garden early, takes a deep breath, and doesn't bring his phone. In the afternoon, he eats early, only lightly, avoiding caffeine, sugar, and alcohol. In the evening, he listens to Margaret's old CD, reads an old poem, and then writes a 5-line diary entry, "How I Live Today." 3 weeks later, for the first time, he slept for 4 hours straight without waking up. 1 month later, he slept for 6 hours deeply. 2 months. He woke up without a heavy head. His heart was not racing. His hands were not shaking. And one morning, he said to himself in the mirror, "I am being reborn every night from my sleep." Sleep, an act so normal that we forget it is the pillar of life. According to research from the NIH, U.S. National Institutes of Health, people over 65 years old who sleep less than 5 hours per night are at risk of 43% increase in memory disorders, 62% increase in cardiovascular disease, 3 times more likely to fall in the home. But on the contrary, if they sleep deeply for 6 to 8 hours each night, older adults can increase cell recovery ability, keep memory longer, balance emotions, reduce depression, significantly extended life. John no longer sought sleep as a desperate desire. He welcomed it as a gift, quiet, gentle, that every old man deserved. Sleep well, for him, is not a luxury. It is the declaration of a soul that has made peace with memories, with loneliness, with things that cannot be changed. If you, the person watching this video, can still sleep deeply and wake up feeling peaceful, know this: your body is being restored, your heart is being maintained, your brain is being purified. And if you are having trouble sleeping, don't choose to forget yourself with medicine. Start sleeping again by coming back to life, from the morning sunlight, from a cup of hot tea, from a piece of music without words, from a handwritten note every night. And then you will see, sleep is the silent worker who helps you live longer, live deeper, live more truly. We have just gone through 8 lives, each person a fulcrum, each story a silent miracle. From Richard, who stood without a handrail, to Esther, who walked to live, Frank, who kept his balance as if to keep his dignity, Joseph, who learned to sit down and stand up as a declaration of independence, Henry, who carried a shopping bag as a way to keep his strong image in his wife's eyes, Walter, who climbed the stairs to keep his heart beating in his own way, Louise, whose memory was like a treasure that kept his identity, and John, who slept for the second time to start living again. You can see yourself in someone. You may not be able to do those things either, but the most important thing is not where you are, it's where you are going. And are you willing to start today with the smallest thing? If you find this video meaningful, please like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your loved ones who are on the journey of living with old age. You never know. This story may save the spirit of someone who is silently collapsing. Don't forget to leave a comment below. How many of the 8 things above do you still do, or where do you want to start again? I will read them all and reply to each one.